guys! This is part 4 of the series that I started to share my journey of going through the Drawing Foundations courses at New Masters Academy. I never went to art school, but I've always wanted to get really good at art and just see where that journey takes me in life, so here we are at New Masters Academy learning the fundamentals. Since starting the Foundations track, I've really seen my drawing skills improve so much. But in part 4, I really saw my figure drawings go from here to here because of a class called Dynamic Gesture Drawing. And I'll show you guys all the work I did for that class in this video and more. And at the time of filming this right now, I'm also in my late 3rd trimester with baby number 2, who we are so excited for. A few months ago, I set out the goal for myself that I wanted to finish part 4 of the Drawing Foundations before going into labor. And I'm so happy I did, because once the newborn stage hits, I know that it's gonna take a while to adjust to things again. And it sounds silly, but I didn't want part 4 to be an open loop in my head during this time. So it feels like a really big milestone to have completed part 4, and with that, let's get into it. So part 4 is mainly focused on figure drawing and head drawing, focusing mainly on short poses and the gesture and construction phases. There's no long poses or anatomy in the Drawing Foundations. That's for later tracks, like in figure 1. In part 4, there are a minimum of 2 classes that you have to complete. There's a choice to take Dynamic Gesture Drawing, taught by Vilppu, or Drawing with Force, taught by Mike Matesi. And then everyone is required to take Constructive Head Drawing, taught by Steve Huston. I don't know much about Drawing with Force, and I don't want to misrepresent the content, so I won't touch on it. I chose to take Dynamic Gesture Drawing instead for several reasons. First, the lectures are taught by Vilppu, who is a modern-day master and legendary instructor. And short story time, I had first heard of Vilppu a few years ago when I first started taking online art classes, because I had an art friend who was taking classes on his online school Vilppu Academy, where you can receive critique directly from Glenn himself. And I didn't know anything about Glenn. I only Googled some of his art and actually decided against taking a class at the time, which is kind of embarrassing to say looking back, because my reasonings were completely off base. Okay, embarrassing is probably not the right word, because it's a totally normal thought to have with where I was in my art journey. But when I first saw Glenn's work a few years ago, I thought his work was a bit too loose and sketchy for my taste, and not really accurate to what I thought a photo reference would look like. And as a beginner, I definitely placed a lot of emphasis on accuracy and polished rendering. But now that I have a bit more experience with drawing, I'm just so incredibly blown away by how good Glenn is. And I think that feeling will only increase with time as I learn even more and understand the things that he's doing. He is truly a master, and there's so much movement and gesture in his work. He's never copying, and he's always inventing and designing to give his figures more life, and really delivering an experience and feeling in his drawings. It's so inspiring, and in Dynamic Gesture Drawing, you really get to learn his process for gesture drawing, which is another big reason I wanted to take this class, because my figures were a lot more stiff and I wasn't sure how to go about incorporating more gesture and movement in my figures. Apparently, this class is also very good to take if you plan on doing any sort of figure invention. And lastly, it's a very well-known course in the NMA community, and it's known for being very difficult, but I'm always blown away by the work that I see people doing in this class. So that was a big part of my motivation for wanting to take this class. And a big motivation for even doing the Foundations courses from the beginning was actually in order to prepare myself to take this class specifically. Since Part 1, I've always had it in my head that I can't wait to take Dynamic Gesture Drawing, and Now that I have, I can say that it really delivered on my expectations and more. It is a challenging class, but it is so rewarding, and I definitely think it's a class that everyone should take with the video feedback option. Let's get into the actual week-by-week homework that I did. Okay, week 1 was an intro to Glenn's process for gesture and what gesture is, which is the feeling of what the figure is doing and how all the different parts of the body work with each other to express a story point, movement, or action. And he says it's the essence of what you're trying to achieve and communicate, which sounds super abstract, but oddly, going through this class from beginning to end, I feel like I get it more. For the homework, we had to do various timed poses, 10 seconds, 2 minutes, and 10-minute poses. And let me just say that 10 seconds is no time at all. I was shocked at how little 10 seconds felt like when you're trying to capture what a figure is doing. Glenn makes it look easy. Even 2 minutes feels very short. And I submitted this homework for the first week, and I remember feeling like, I totally get this. This method makes so much sense, but then I got the feedback that I didn't pass, and it was like, okay, I think I missed the point of the assignment. So it was actually really helpful to get the video feedback to help me understand what I needed to focus on more. I was told I was focusing too much on the outside contour and shape and not thinking about the figure enough as a mass of rhythms. So when I resubmitted the assignment, I tried to incorporate more of that. And I'm thankful that the outside contour stuff kept getting brought up in my feedbacks throughout this class because it helped me break out of that habit more. Week 2 was a continuation of the initial gesture with more of an emphasis on feeling and movement. The homework was pretty similar with the timed poses. We had to do 30-second, 2-minute, and 5 to 10-minute poses. And I like how Glenn says that you have to feel the pose and draw what you're feeling in a way to communicate an experience, which was very helpful for me to try to channel that in my drawing, because usually I'm kind of just on autopilot trying to focus on proportions and boxes and cylinders. But when I'm thinking more about the feeling of a pose, I find that it changes the drawing completely. It's really weird, but it's really effective. And these were the longer poses for week 2. In week 3, Glenn talked about how to apply spherical forms to the body and how to think about going from one side of the form to the other. I think I went a little overboard with applying the sphere, and everything looks super round like the Michelin Man, but I think it's a super useful exercise. Of course, at the start of every assignment, we also had to do the short linear gestures as a warm-up, and all of these spherical forms are built on top of that initial linear gesture, which you can see a bit showing through in the underdrawing. The linear gesture is always the first step in this class. In week 4, Glenn talked about corners and box forms and how to apply that to the figure and what general landmarks to consider. Boxes are super useful to clarify directions, angles, and forms, and these drawings were actually a lot of fun to do. It feels like putting together a puzzle, and I like it when I can just focus on one concept at a time and do these super mannequinized drawings. In week 5, Glenn talked about how cylindrical forms relate to everything we've been doing, and how whenever you're going across the form with an ellipse, you're essentially drawing a cylinder, which helps us understand direction and whether something is going towards or away from us. And for the homework, we practice applying that to short and longer poses. There was a little bit of rendering being introduced to show that we can apply the idea of the cylinder to the hatching as well. In week 6, Glenn went over the basic procedure and how the process of drawing is always going from general to specific, whether it's composing or doing figure invention or drawing from imagination. For example, in this class, we go from the gesture, then to the construction with spheres, boxes, and cylinders, and then finally, we describe the form with rendering using modeling tone, direct light, and atmosphere, which are covered in the last 3 weeks. For this week's homework, we put together all the tools that we covered so far to do these drawings. Then in week 7, we started talking about rendering, specifically using the modeling tone. And in my opinion, this is one of the most mind-blowing concepts that Glenn teaches, because I feel like it's not widely taught at all, and not super intuitive either. I think the way that rendering is usually taught is with direct light, which is that sphere diagram we all know, with the core shadow and cast shadow. But modeling tone is an entirely conceptual way to think about rendering form, where what's directly facing you is in the light, and what's going away from you in terms of viewing angle gets darker. And it's such a useful tool to render form, especially from imagination or ambient lighting situations, or just in general to make something appear more 3D. It's super common in tattoo art, and I found this week's lecture super insightful because one of my weaknesses is definitely with the rendering and making things appear more 3D without relying on trying to copy exactly the values that I see. So for this homework, we had to ignore what we were seeing in the photo and instead apply the modeling tone. So the rendering here is actually not following what's in the photo reference, but it's coming from our understanding of the form. And I can't reiterate how useful this week was for me to learn about. In week 8, Glenn talked about direct light and the laws of light, stuff like the highlight, modeling halftone, reflected light, core shadow, and cast shadow, and how to go beyond just copying what we see, but really manipulating these elements to create an experience. And that's what I love about Glenn's teaching. You learn the theory and understanding behind things, but also how and why to change it. So it's like you're always drawing from imagination and designing, even with the reference. Week 9 was the final week where Glenn talked about atmosphere and how to think about the air surrounding objects that we can't actually see, and how utilizing it in our drawings helps to create space and emphasize the gesture. This week was super helpful because I feel like usually when I'm rendering, I'm just thinking about the figure itself, trying to capture the forms, and not really thinking about the figure in any kind of space or environment. But adding atmosphere really takes it to the next level and helps to make the drawing feel more alive. And he talks about how to create the atmosphere with both tone and line quality. It's stuff I've seen people do in figure drawings, like that fancy atmosphere around the figure, and I wanted to emulate that for myself, but I didn't know how to do all that. For example, my line drawings are usually really closed off, and I don't know where to leave space in between the lines, just that I probably should. But Glenn mentioned how leaving space between the lines creates a sense of atmosphere and has an atmospheric effect. So now I can be more conscious of where I'm leaving that space because I know more what the reasoning is now. And the same thing goes for applying atmospheric tone throughout the drawing. I can do it more intentionally now, instead of trying to guess where I should be applying tones to make something look good. And I'm really happy with how this back drawing turned out. It's just not something I feel like I could have done before, and this class really gave me the tools and confidence needed to do something like this. And I want to definitely try to explore longer poses in the future and push my figure drawings more and develop my understanding of anatomy and rendering. So that's it for dynamic gesture drawing. I felt a huge improvement, and overall, I fell in love with Glenn's teaching style, and I'm looking forward to taking more of his classes on NMA, maybe even trying to take a class or two at Vilppu Academy to get feedback from him directly that would be such an incredible opportunity to do. Okay, moving on to constructive head drawing, taught by Steve Huston, another incredible and legendary instructor at NMA. A lot of people fall in love with Steve Huston's style of teaching. He's very good at simplifying concepts and explaining them. And I feel like this class is packed with so much good information. Even though it's on the shorter side of only being 6 weeks, I found that this class was a great introduction to constructing heads and features from both a 2D graphic and 3D approach. But with being such a short class, I think it's really meant to just serve as an introduction to head drawing. I won't get super into depth on each week. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but I still want to show the homework that I did. And what I really liked about this class and dynamic gesture drawing was that every week there's always some sort of old masters analysis, so you can see how the old masters are designing and constructing the head and figure. In weeks 1 and 2, we learned about basic construction of the head, and we had to construct the head in these short poses from different views without getting detailed into the features. There's so much good information about proportions, shapes, planes, different views, and tilts. So much so that I found myself having to replay parts of the lecture a lot because of losing focus. It's a very information-dense class in a good way, but you also have to be really lasered in when you're watching the lectures, I think. In week 3, we jumped into construction of the eyes and eye socket from different views, and the homework was timed poses. And I like that Steve talks about the whole eye socket, including cheek, and not just the eyeball and eyelid. I feel like it gave me a better understanding of that area in relation to the skull. In week 4, we covered the construction of the nose from different views and the subtleties of the line weight in different areas of the nose. In week 5, we covered the construction of the mouth from different views. Lastly, in week 6, we covered the ears from different views and how to think about the planes of the ear. And the odd thing about this class is that you never actually combine all the features together. There's no week 7, but I feel like the last assignment should have been drawing a head with all of the features together. I think the reason it feels like an odd place to end the class is that this class is actually part of a longer class that covers head drawing in more detail, but I think they didn't want to include that entire class in the foundations module, so they split it up. And what I like about Steve's approach is that it has a good mix of 2D and 3D thinking, and also got me thinking more about how I would draw heads in a more stylized and cartoony manner, because Steve's approach is all about making things simple yet characteristic. That's all the homework I did for part 4 of the Drawing Foundations courses at NMA. I'm so happy I made the decision to do these foundations classes. It's helped me fill in so many gaps in my learning and improve my art. I'm really excited for part 5, which touches on composition, intro to landscape, and perspective, which are all big weaknesses for me, so I'm really looking forward to it. Anyways, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.